So thank you very much for your kind invitation. Also, I have the privilege to run the second session, which is devoted to the impact of economic research on society and best practice examples from North America. So, once again, we have two rounds of questions. And let's start, and I think that we will start with the first question concerning what is the impact of your research, or maybe the research which is conducted at your department, at your university, on society. What is your experience from America? Could you give us and could you share your opinion, your views? So shall we start once again with the same order and with Professor Mike Peng?
Thank you. First, we have to impact academia. One measure of impact is citations. Do other scholars cite your work, right? So I think I'm very proud to share with you that other scholars worldwide have been citing some of our work, and increasingly so. And I would encourage more of you to cite our work. So we claim that we are growing a tree. That is our impact. Okay, an academic tree, a family of theories. It's no longer just one view. So we have an institution-based view of corporate governance, an institution-based view of corporate diversification. That's the scope of the firm I just mentioned. Institution-based view of entrepreneurship, intellectual property rights, international business strategy, and large family firms. So that is one example. And I think the impact is we are influencing future research agenda. So we could do an IBV of corporate social responsibility, competitive dynamics, hybrid organizations, and deglobalization and sanctions. That's the heart of one of the previous questions, right? Let me skip a few slides. Some other examples, right? So we talk about the growth of the firm. Impact. Another piece of impact, a dimension of impact is impacting students. We talked about impacting academic researchers. So these books are disseminated and studied by students in over 50 countries. So I'll just show some examples. So there is this Portuguese edition, there's a paperback, Chinese edition, Spanish edition, and then European edition. In Europe, we have this thing marketed as international business, and we went to India as well. So I think these are pieces of evidence of impact. Some other work regarding impact is really consulting, directly impacting company managers, practitioners, and policymakers. So I've done some work with different multinationals, such as AstraZeneca, MTR. MTR is Mass Transit Railway in Hong Kong. But if you take any subway in London or Stockholm, Sweden, MTR is operating some of the subway systems in London and Stockholm. So MTR is in Hong Kong, but it is also a multinational, global. And there's Texas Instruments, NGOs with US-China Business Council, US-India Chamber of Commerce, governments ranging from a suburb of Dallas, city of Plano, to Hong Kong Research Council, UK Government Office for Science, and international organizations. So I think these are some useful evidence of impact, I guess. I'll stop here. Thank you.
And the same question to Professor Miroux. I think that is working without.
Okay, yeah, that one is working. First, thank you very much. And talking about the impact of our research on society, which is more than social impact, because impact on society may be social element, but also governance and so on. There are, in a way, there are basically three avenues which come to my mind. Is that first, through your relationship with the academics and how you can contribute to developing theories or confront your theories and like a snowball rolling. There is a relationship with the students, and perhaps that's where we see the more direct and visible impact in terms of societies by conveying to students messages that you feel are very, very important, which actually will translate later on in their professional life. What's very important, in my view, is to give a critical mind to the students so that they don't take for granted whatever they see, whatever they read. That's a key issue. And the other channel is through policy making. The relationships that you have either with national governments, it's a little bit more not difficult, but it all depends upon the context of the country, or the international organization, as I mentioned a moment ago. So these three channels are very, very important, and whatever you study, there are three avenues through which your ideas can, in a way, impregnate constituencies. Now, in terms of example, I just mentioned two examples of studies that we have been doing with my colleague Lourdes Casanova, which are related to sustainable development. One is an exercise that we did last year, which was about trying to see to what extent sustainable development through ESG concept was developing or spreading in emerging markets. And I would say that this is just the beginning of a journey. So ESG stands as, I guess you know, environment, social, and governance. And there are increasingly ESG criteria which are, or requirements, which are put on the companies on the part of investors. And that opens a huge Pandora box about the validity of the criteria and all the debate about greenwashing. Anyway, so last year what we did an exercise on enterprises from emerging markets, and we wanted to have an idea of what was going on. And so what we did is that we used a score given by rating agencies on ESG elements of about 2,000 companies from emerging markets. All the details of this, all the technicalities are in the emerging market multinational report that we have published at TMI last year. But the bottom line is that we ended up with a group of 200 companies which were performing well. But the more important thing was the journey, the process. And for instance, there is something that which was so flagrant, is that the lack of data on environmental, social, and governance performance on firms from emerging markets. Developed firms are relatively well covered. For instance, you have Bloomberg, which has sustainability indexes, FTSE. You have. When you go to emerging markets, much more difficult. We found a Chinese data bank, which is called WIND, which covers Chinese, but for other countries, much more difficult. And there are two reasons for it. The first is that the importance of state-owned enterprises from emerging markets, so you don't have publicly available data. They are not quoted, so they don't have to have annual reports for the investors. Or you have family business, in particular in Latin America. So where do the information come from? So this is the first thing. And the second thing, which corporate social responsibility and ESG is an Anglo-Saxon centered concept, actually. So it is not necessarily apprehended the same way in, for instance, emerging market. Sometimes the idea is alien. Corporation, we talk about philanthropy and so on. So people are not used to report on what they are doing, even if they are doing well. So you have an unbalanced field. So it's very difficult to do that. Yes, these companies are doing better than others. So the conclusion is that yes, we have a group of companies which appear to do well, but at the end of the day, there is a major problem at the root of the exercise, which is a lack of data, the comprehension of the concept. And also something which, to some extent, and I would tend to think about that, is that corporate social responsibility, ESG, perhaps is the second best. And I'll say why. We looked at countries and companies. In our exercise, we found that companies from Thailand and South Africa were comparatively doing relatively well. So in our starting sample, we had about 60% of Chinese companies, like 10% of Indian and so on. And we had 2% from Thailand and 2% from South Africa. In the group of the relatively well-performing company, South Africa and Thailand were the number 2 and number 3 country in terms of number of good citizen company, each with 12 and 13%. So we were kind of surprised. We said, oh, perhaps the data is wrong. And we kept on in common. And actually, we looked at, and we also looked at the policies of the country. Interestingly, in emerging economy, Thailand and South Africa are the 2 countries which have a relatively well-organized network of regulations. Thailand is environment for obvious reason, tourism, and social. And South Africa is social of governance, because you have the heritage of the apartheid regime, which had to be dealt with, and also you have governance codes, they are called the King Codes. So these 2 countries who had a relatively good network of regulation, the companies were doing relatively well. So we found that was an interesting conclusion, which opened up, and that could be a question, is there a relationship with the level of regulatory regulation and laws and the performance of the enterprises? I think this is a key question for corporate social responsibility and ESG, especially nowadays. So we did that last year, and this year we also did, again, in the perspective of sustainability, we did a ranking of countries, and that's another approach. We want to show that even if emerging economy, if you benchmark them versus developed economies, you always have the idea that they are not doing so well. But you have to take into account the effort so that you have a progressive and an encouraging approach. And that's what we did this year by doing an index of countries, our E20+1 group. And this index combines economic development and then ESG performance. I will stop there, but I encourage you to go to our 2 reports where you will have all the details. And as I say, the conclusion is one thing, but the journey in terms of research is, in our view, what also matters.
So thank you very much for your contribution. And what about the impact of society of the Polish research and Polish perspective? And in fact, as I underline the international one, because as you realize, the research must be reflected into the society. So the society should be also the recipient of the research and also absorb this research somehow. So what is your experience?
Okay, so I'll try to show you. Well, the first set of, impact and channels, apart from academic impact that was already mentioned, it goes mainly first through network of colleagues. It's done through scientific associations that very often also involve practitioners, businesses, and just citizens. So in our area, it's mainly Regional Studies Association, and we have a network, and this is research network on cohesion policy called CPNet, where we try to organize not only scientific events, but we also open the workshops to, as I mentioned before, to the policy makers. We invite them, and they are providing contributions as well. So we have this opportunity to confront scientific findings with the real life evidence. And then we have a discussion, and this very much is liked by both sides, because we can see later on if anything is translated into into practice. So this is one of the channels and organizations that I'm involved in. I'm a coordinator of the CPNet right now, so we are going to continue with our works, and also Professor Małgorzata Dziembała is a part of our organization, so she knows exactly how it works. And also there are other scientific organizations. They do pretty much the same. They are international, so they are not only Polish-based associations, which is better, because then you have a possibility to present Polish perspectives, but also to learn from the others. So this is good. But also, of course, we are using this Polish scientific societies very often just to present our work and to try to influence somehow the policy making. Then I was involved in consultation with Polish Parliament in the past and also with the Senate when we provided expertise in different fields related to economic integration, to operation of common market, internal market of the EU. So it was also very much appreciated. And what is more right now, we are very often as scholars invited to be a part of consultative bodies to regional authorities. This is something in the regional policies that we call operational programs. So there are documents that allows you to spend the money for public investment. And there are bodies called the monitoring committees, consisted of businesses, NGOs, scholars, public administration. So we have a broad representation of different groups. And we have an impact on the criteria for the projects to be chosen to be co-financed. So this is a huge impact, I would say, because we can, basing on our knowledge and on our research findings, we can propose something to the legislation, and this is very strong an instrument. And is also widely used, not only in Poland, it's the same in the whole European Union, because the structure is the same. It's regulated by European regulations. However, this is how we can contribute to the daily life of people, even by setting a certain criteria. So we can decide if the project fits to the general objectives, if they are sustainable, if they bring benefits, longer benefits to the society or not. So, of course, we have discussions and we do not agree on everything, but this is a quite interesting forum just to express the ideas and also bring our point of view to this process. And besides, we have also consultancy. At our university, we have a knowledge transfer company that cooperates strongly with many companies from different sectors, and our colleagues are invited to provide either a strategy for businesses or a strategy for administration, or we also provide trainings for, we also involve students in these works. So very often it's joint research or just like a consultancy job prepared by professors and their students. So they can also have business experience while they are studying. So I think it's a very useful tool that is in place in Poznań at our university. We also provide training programs, the extramural programs mainly for professionals. So this is also how you sell your knowledge to people. They're coming from different businesses, different entities, and people are coming at different stages of their life because sometimes you need to change your competences. So you are coming to postgraduate programs and just shifting your professional life. And this is also the channel and way of impacting on people with your knowledge, scientific knowledge, but also practical knowledge. You know how to apply it, and you are just providing this knowledge to the students. It's not only MBA; it's also a different set of programs that we have in place. And also, media interviews and participation in public debates, especially like in here, for example. This is one of the examples, as well as it's broadcasted, it's streamlined, so we can have an impact on other people who are interested in such issues. So I think it is also another way of delivering kind of impact. Also classes, like for regular students. So we are also sharing not only like basic fundamentals of our knowledge, but also are trying to show you how it can be applicable to your daily life, to your professional life. So this is also another way of impacting on people. And also like seminars for the colleagues. So I think that there are major issues I wanted to raise in this part. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your contribution. It reminds me about my practical experience also, being an expert of the Ministry of Regional Development for the elaboration of the regional programs concerning cross-border cooperation. So it was also my good example of the impact of the research. So my knowledge, let's say, was reflected into the operational program. In that sense, I make a contribution. And I closely cooperate with the regional authorities and also with the regional authorities from cross-border authorities, let's say from the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic as well. So in fact, we just more and more pay and focus on this impact, because as we know, as we realize, the impact can be diversified in different spheres, in different fields, and also it says we can underline it's not only the economic impact, but also can be visible on different levels. And I think that our guest has a great experience in giving us some good examples. So let's turn and let's move to another questions, do the second round of questions concerning could you give us some examples of social impacts, the best examples, just right from America, and also not only from America, but maybe from Poland as well. So the sequence is the same, the order is the same, so...
Okay, I'll try. I'll give you two examples, okay? One, not very effective. One, hopefully effective, okay? So I have to go through. Okay, here we go. So, 4 fundamental questions, right? So we talked about fundamental question 1, why do firms differ? Fundamental question 2, how do firms behave? Third one is what determines the scope of the firm, right? Fourth one is what determines the success and failure of firms around the globe. So in one summary, one figure, one visual representation, we essentially said, we focus on that question, and there are many ways, and you spent, 3-4 years trying to answer that question, right? Well, we argue that you need only these 2 views. One is resource-based view. What's unique, what's specific about what you can contribute as a company, what you can provide as an individual contributor. No one else can do it. Only you can do it. So the one on top is institution-based view. So what are institutions' rules of the game, right? Formal rules, laws, regulations, informal norms, ethics, and cultures. So it's the combination of both, resulting in this way to answer the question. Basically, we said, if you want to understand company performance on a worldwide basis, start with these 2 views. Of course, you can add your analysis, all right? Now, here comes the fun part. 9 years ago, the UK government found me, okay? Most consulting work has to remain confidential, But this particular consulting project is in the public domain as long as we gave credit. So Crown copyright, that's how you cite it. It is available, this whole report is available, okay? So the UK government discovered me and my colleague Klaus Meyer, who is the co-author of my European adaptation. My hypothesis is some students studied my book, and these students went to join the UK government, and they found me. So it was a massive UK government project. I was the only US-based expert. So the dependent variable is markets for UK manufacturing output, in particular, made in UK products. Made in UK products. Okay, here's the fun part. Colleagues, students, here, everybody. How many of you currently are using or wearing anything made in UK now? Anyone? Anything? One more time, repeat the question. Anyone right now wearing or using, including or drinking anything made in the UK? Your silence is your answer. Thank you very much. And I just read the university's history. So we have a proud history of 85 years, right? So imagine in the year 1937, okay, all of us, 85 years older. Whatever age you are, okay? 85 years older, the first class of this great university in the year 1937, November, what day is today? November 16th or whatever, right, today. 1937. Answer my question. Would you be wearing anything made in UK in that class, the first class of this university, 1937? Wearing, using. At that time, every male student will have to come to class like this. You have to wear a nice jacket, a good tie, and you have to have better looking shoes, okay? And everybody will have to have a fountain pen, nice paper pad. I would imagine some of you will be wearing something made in UK, right? Using something made in UK, right? The UK export market share in a class like this, I hypothesize 100 years ago, will be above 0. Would you like to support my hypothesis? Because I've done this in many, many classes worldwide. Okay, do we have it? We have no one from the UK now, right? Okay, all right, so here's the answer. Why do people not using made in UK products today? Okay, number one, resource-based view. Made in UK products have to deliver the value in comparison with other products delivering similar value. Imagine this pen. 100 years ago, it could have been made in the UK. Today, it probably is made in China. Okay, so at this price point, you're not buying that pen made in UK. All right, got it? And then institution-based view, don't forget why UK was able to have a much bigger market share in its export output. Not only because of the wonderful product value delivered by made in UK products, but institution-based view. Much of the world was ruled by the UK in the year 1937. You go to India, you go to South Africa, okay? These were UK colonies. So folks in India, in South Africa at that time, could not buy other stuff made in other countries unless these other pens, other shoes, other jackets, other ties came to these markets overcoming tariff barriers. Remember, that was why we Americans fought for the War of Independence. So we no longer had to do this under this institution-based control by the UK, right? Okay, so it's a combination of both. Made in UK products at that time had a much bigger market share. Number one, delivered by the product value. That can be explained by the resource-based view. But number two, we have to look at the institution-based view. Imagine much of the world was controlled by the UK. Okay, so now 100 years have passed. The largest UK colony is now the British Virgin Islands, right? So essentially all gone. No big markets under the UK control. And then from an informal institutional-based view, Poland was never colonized by the UK, but I would imagine 100 years ago, students and colleagues in this class would feel it was cool to consume something made in the UK, right? Because other colleagues, prestigious people are consuming products made in the UK. You want to look good, you want to look cool, so you consume made in UK products. That is gone now today. Made in UK products, I'm sorry, is no longer cool according to this class, according to you, right? And number two, made in UK products were still exporting to the rest of the EU, thanks to UK-EU membership. Our project was to look at UK products in China, Russia, India, Mexico, emerging markets. Everybody said these were the hot markets of the future. Let's target these markets. And we took a detailed look at the data of UK products in China. Made in UK products was number 26 in China. Number 26, meaning there are 25 countries exporting more products to China than the UK, led by the United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, blah, 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 blah. So even if UK doubled its export market share of products to China, becoming number 13, will that help? Yes. But will that make a huge impact? No. So UK products, we advise the UK government, benefited from EU membership. So the policy conclusion is, regardless of how much growth you can have in China, India, South Africa, you will still, geography is destiny, you will still benefit from your EU membership. And remember, the year was 2013, and the idiots did not listen, they got out of the EU. That was the end of our story. So we made money as consultants, and the rest of the UK, shall I go on? I don't need to. Institution-based view, okay? Totally ignoring consulting reports. So that's example one, not very effective. But we did our best, okay? Convincing the idiots, but did not listen. Okay, now, the year was 2017. President Trump became the new president. He said NAFTA is the worst trade deal that he will smash. And NAFTA is with the United States, Mexico, and Canada, right? So everybody was terrified. What if President Trump delivered what he threatened? He often means it. So I wrote this article to publish in the Dallas Morning News. So I wrote lots of boring academic papers, okay, very long, but this is very short and readable, only one page. So basically, in this major newspaper in Texas, the question is, what happens to Texas if the US withdraws from NAFTA? Answer one, relax, trading will still continue, okay? Geography, again, is destiny. The city where I come from, Dallas, Texas, is geographically midway between Canada and Mexico. We go northeast 1,300 miles or 2,000 kilometers. That will reach Toronto. We go south, same distance, 1,300 miles, 2,000 kilometers. That will be Mexico City. So Texas as a state is the biggest state benefiting from NAFTA. So if we lose NAFTA, we will still trade, but we will lose a lot of the gains from trade, and economic prosperity will be less. And number two, I wanted to remind people in the White House that Texas is the #1 state that sent President Trump to the White House. We are the #1 red state, all right? So I also wrote another article to Texas CEO magazine, very similar. What happens if NAFTA goes away, okay? So same idea, so we have to remind people in the White House, but White House did not discover me. So, we do things indirectly. So publishers of the Texas CEO magazine had a special issue about NAFTA, just to tell people, tell all readers, all stakeholders, how wonderful NAFTA has contributed. In the beginning, that documentary, I think that student character from this university is called Hela, right? She said the North American unemployment rate was 10%. Maybe so for the entire continent. But for Texas, we only have 4% unemployment rate, otherwise known as full employment, in part because of NAFTA. So we have to remind people in the White House that if they took away those benefits, economic prosperity could be undermined, and we people in Texas may no longer want to vote someone into the White House. So every member of the Texas congressional delegation received a copy of the magazine. Hopefully they read it. Hopefully that influenced their work. And hopefully that made President Trump to do something like this. He said, I'm going to smash NAFTA. But instead of just smashing it, broken into all pieces, I'm going to replace this with USMCA, regarded as US-Mexico-Canada agreement. So the majority of the provisions in NAFTA continued. So we all breathe easier. So all these efforts were not for nothing. The efforts for the UK government were like for nothing. We just made a little money as consultants. So thanks very much. These are two examples.
So what about your experience, Professor Miroux?
Thank you. First, if it would be possible for the technicians to bring back the first presentation I had today. If not, I will, if it's possible.
Please check.
I will. I just in waiting for that. I just mentioned this morning, just a moment ago, our relationship with the policymakers, and for instance, in terms of, we have very close relationship when we do our report with the OECD, EMNet. They have a network of basically practitioners from emerging market, and it's an interesting outlet within the OECD. So basically, it's a special within the OECD. It's a unit which brings into the discussion representative of the private sectors, and you have around the table academics like us, we contribute, policymakers, delegates, and private sector representatives. So that's a way to have an impact. It's not that presentation, so I will continue. There are two direct examples that I'd like to mention. Is first the way we, the impact we have our society, for instance, through our students. In the institute, our students, they are engaged in what they call majors in the United States, and their participation in the institute is because they want a particular focus on these specific issues, which is emerging market. So we have students which are from Cornell Tech who are working in engineering and very technical issues. So our social impact to some extent is for those students which may be less exposed to economic or legal or sustainability issues, is for us to share our concerns, for instance, or our idea with them. So that's very important. And the other one element also that I wanted to mention is we organize every year an annual conference. We were talking a moment ago about the kind of dissemination that you can do. This type of exercise that you are doing is essential because it puts you also on the global map. You know, this is very, very important. Nowadays, if you are not visible on the internet, one way or another, you are almost non-existing. And it breaks my heart to say that because I have a little problem with social media to some extent. I have my own opinions, I'm extremely critical, but you have to recognize that this kind of meeting is essential. It puts you on the global map. People will know that in the University of Katowice, you know, you are open to the world. So it's good for the exterior and it's good also for the student in terms of impact. Not tomorrow, but perhaps the day after tomorrow. So the impact on society is not a short term, it's a medium term and long term impact. That's why your question is very difficult, by the way. So in Cornell, we're organizing this annual conference, and what my colleagues, Lourdes Carzanova, launched 2 years ago, she launched what's called a case competition. And actually, I encourage you to participate as you know, it's a business exercise. A case is put on the table. There is a process. You register, you prepare a case, and there are laureates and so on. Again, through the case, we also convey ideas because the judges of the case take into account not only the business aspect but also other elements, and it's a way to transfer our expertise and our knowledge. So I really, that's something that's also one way to have impact on society through the work that you are doing. So there is a content and then there is a channel, the dissemination. And by the way, I was very interested by the examples that Professor Mike Peng gave, because in a way it shows that it's one thing to have a very lengthy academic papers, but what made the difference apparently is the apparition in the newspapers. So perhaps for research and academics, we may have to think of being more present in the press. In the US, you have, for instance, Paul Krugman, who writes quite often, and it's a delight to read him. He has perspective, and I think it has an impact on society. Or you have also Joseph Stiglitz in the French press, in the Monde. You have also, once in a while, academics writing, not enough, unfortunately. So that's a way of having a social impact also. And I'd like to, I thought your example was quite vivid and quite interesting from that point of view. But perhaps the most direct impact that we have now is, I would say, through our students. And I hope it works.
So the presentation is ready. If you would like to use it,
What is? No, it was just.
No, my mic.
Okay. It was just because, as I said, we have the education, so we have the major and the minor, we have the outreach to the conference, and we have the research and the knowledge. And as I said a moment ago, we involve very directly students in our work, so that the closer relationship is very important.
So thank you. And what about Professor Musiałkowska? What is your examples of social impacts?
I decided to pick up a few examples. One is related to our work research project that I mentioned in the previous session. After we published a paper on the Jessica initiative used in the cities, we were called by Euractiv portal, which is European media portal, very widely recognized, and they asked us for an interview on this because they wanted to deliver the message to the European citizens and as well to the policymakers, because they are based in Brussels. So it was one of the examples how you can be recognized in the society, let's say, by delivering your research. So you know that the journalists and media people are also researching what you are doing. So this is also something that is encouraging to some extent. So it was one of the examples. And the interview was published, and we saw that there were many entries and downloads of some materials that were published on the website of this journal. So we also were talking about successes and failures of the policy as such, because it was a part of a book. We coded it, and there was also dissemination of our work put together by scholars from Europe. Another example I wanted to mention is a position paper that we wrote on the role of the cohesion policy in the COVID. And we, firstly, we addressed the issue of the main purpose of the cohesion policy as such, and then we saw the discrepancy, because the instruments were used in the crisis times. So they were not used always for the purpose that they were meant to be. So we also left the message that if we want to have such an attitude, we either need to increase the allocations for the cohesion policy, or we should propose other instruments, because otherwise we cannot continue with achieving the goals that were predicted in the European Union, in the regulations, in the treaties. And we published this on this Regional Studies Association website, and everybody has an access to that. And we also promoted it during conferences as scholars that signed this and prepared this position paper. It was not very long, like one pager with several points, so it was easy to read and to somehow remember what's the most important message. And this is another way how you can impact either the society or public sphere or even private companies. And I think it's also good to do things like that. And also related to COVID, we have a cooperation with the Mexican university, which is La UNAM from the city of Mexico. And last year we organized 4 seminars showing the impact of COVID on different aspects of economics and business. So we had firstly this international cooperation online, because of course it was during the pandemic, so we didn't manage to meet each other. However, with the colleagues from Mexico, we presented a different perspective, and it also opens up again this issue mentioned in the previous sections, that we have completely different views, that the problems are seen differently, that you can propose different solutions to a problem given the context that you are facing. So it was extremely rich, I think, also for our colleagues from the university, when you see that the problems are like put differently, and you have to think differently on different elements, on economic systems, on the measures that you provide, on the assistance that you provide, or how you incentivize the businesses to operate after the crisis or during the crisis. So I would say that it was something very important, not only personally to me, but also for the others, just to have this comparative visions and insights into the problems. And this is still available on social media, on YouTube of both universities. So if you are interested, you can just find the recordings of this seminars in the website. So this is another channel I didn't mention before, but it was mentioned by both of you just minutes ago. So it was another element related to the COVID situation. And the last example, it's not on the slide, but it came to my mind when we've been talking about involving students. We had a project as the university, as this transfer knowledge company, and regional authorities called Odra Hackathon. So firstly, we picked up the groups of students or any interested people who wanted to participate in this competition. They were given a short diagnosis of the overall situation in our region, which is called Wielkopolska, and the German region. And they picked up the problem, and they needed to research this problem. And later on, in the later phase, there were training provided by the experts to the groups. And they proposed the solution during 2 days workshops. So it was really interesting to see the proposal of these solutions, because later on, I was in the jury of this competition. We picked up the winners, and because it was co-funded by the regional authorities of both regions and also from the ministry. We had an opportunity to implement this solution. So it was one of the applications. I have to say that our students won the competition, but it was nothing to do with me in the jury. But still, it was one of the best proposals that we got in this. And then they implemented the application to solve a part of the intergenerational societal problems that we face in both places. So this is another example how you can involve people into your work, and how you can have an impact by implementing certain solutions. So I would say that those 4 examples are enough for this session. Thanks.
So thank you very much for the contribution. It reminds me about the involvement of my department, because we would like to disseminate the knowledge and the research which are working with my colleagues at the department among our students. And one of the examples, it was just the example of the research, because at my department we were conducting a survey and we collected data and on the effect and impact of pandemic on the Polish exporters. And of course, apart from the book that we published together with my colleagues, we just decided to involve our students to elaborate the report on the impact. And some of the students are sitting in the auditorium, and I could recognize the face, and they were working together for some months. And this report was appearing on the website of the university, as well on the website of our department. And the contributors to the report are not only my team, but also my dear students who are deeply involved in the work of our department. And also the results of these reports were presented to the wider audience, to the regional authorities. In fact, during the interview, simply. So I think the impact on the society is visible. And let me give you another example of the involvement of my students into the competition. Because we just cooperate with the American students. I mean, my students there are once again some faces in the auditorium. I could recognize that they won the competition. I mean, just they took the second or just the third place, competing with the students also from America, from the other countries, and there were also the winner. And in fact, they transmitted their knowledge into the competition, and also they were awarded the prize, and also the reviewers of their work was the company. Yes, so this was not the academic. These were not the academics, but the company that appreciated their work. So I think that these two examples from my department shows us that in fact we try to deeply involve our students, and also we are thinking about the society on the impact of the research, because in this way we would like to introduce our international perspective into the regional perspective as well. And so this is our examples, and I think that we must turn to the session of questions. Yes, are there any questions from the audience concerning the American perspective into the research techniques and on the impact of the society? Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so please.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. It was very interesting. Bridging the two conversations today, the first one, there was a discussion on the value of open trade. And certainly I think you mentioned that, especially with emerging markets, especially with the challenges of COVID-19 and its impact, that without increased trade, right, that growth in emerging economies will be difficult. But I think it was also mentioned that there's inequality and some individuals are left behind. And then on this conversation on impact, you gave some great examples of trying to influence, right, the decision to go with open trade, but not being successful. Do you think there's something greater that can be done from an impact perspective of trying to convince, right, the public institutions of the value of open trade, given that you've talked about the benefits of it?
I'll have a quick answer. In the magazine article I actually wrote, so let me quote, "Free trade is not free." Meaning it takes more of us to continuously repeat the message. There are gains from trade. Don't forget Adam Smith, 1776. But it didn't take Adam Smith 1 year to have his ideas be accepted. By the 1820s and 1830s, the British passed their Corn Laws to fully embrace to start to embrace Adam Smith's free trade ideas. It took about 50 years. So the point is, I think for all of us who are pro-global trade, we need to constantly be repeating that message. Education is about reinforcement. Many of us have kids. When we teach our kids, young kids, you tell them once, they're not going to follow. And all students here are younger than us, right? We teach them do one thing, do they do it every day? No, they don't do it. So we'll have to repeat the message as educators, right? No, I think this is the point. Free trade is not free. Because if we didn't, I mean, my dean is not going to like this work I'm doing, right? He said, Mike, why are you not publishing journal articles, right? Writing these, two-page or one-page position papers, right? It's fun, it's short, but I think we need to spend some time. I think, and you mentioned that, and Ida, you mentioned that as well. I think more of us need to do more of this direct translation work. We got to constantly repeat the message, and the other message we're saying is reducing domestic inequality is an important policy agenda, but smashing free trade deals is not a good solution, right? If you want to go for direction A, go to direction A. Don't go to direction B. Imagine if we lose free trade deals, the #1 US company is Walmart stores. And who are the customers in Walmart stores? Primarily people whose income levels are not very, very high. And if we ban all the products made in China, as our President Trump at one point threatened to do, is he going to help these shoppers at Walmart when every price of every product at Walmart goes up thanks to the China tariffs? Therefore, if he's trying to help, restricting free trade or restricting trade is just not a good solution. And it's very simple. But I think we just need to constantly mention that and deliver that and disseminate that so that eventually that message will sink in. So that's my answer.
Would you like to add something?
Just on that, fully agree with you, and in a way, but the issue is that free trade has many advantages, but also it has had constraints. And in the moment where the population especially for instance in European countries, is the moment we saw that we were losing out something, that's when we began reacting. And the difficulty, the challenge is to try to combine the two. And we talk about adapting skills, adapting education and so on, but it takes time. And in the short term, people are realizing, for instance, that they are losing jobs and so on. And perhaps it has been the pace of the change which has been so so fast that the adaptation has taken time. So it's for countries who used to be powers in the world, is a little bit difficult to see that the basis of powers are slowly eroding and that you have to make an additional effort to keep up with what you used to do. So yes, free trade is not free, and the problem is that, yes, we have seen, especially in recent years, that the quick fix. But the quick fix is not the solution. But politically, it takes time. And in the political time, it's the years can't double to some extent.
Maybe one comment. The policymakers and politicians are different animals, I would say. So it's really difficult to have this momentum to have an impact on the decisions to be made. The only thing is just for us to educate, still, if it's just like a common word used in here, and to disseminate the knowledge maybe to the private business fora, to NGOs, and they can have an impact and pressure over the governments and policymakers. Otherwise, we will not reach this goal, because we see the problem, but the political issue is another history. But maybe also we can use the experience with the COVID-19, where we saw that faster reactions were possible because it was a threat to public health, in the whole world, and we saw that some processes can be sped up. So maybe this will be the example to follow, that we are not coming back to the business as usual, but we are learning from this experience. The pandemic is not over, but we see that some reactions were faster, especially in here in Europe, at the European level, that the countries came to some conclusions, to some agreements, and it didn't take 2 years as usual in decision making at the EU level, but it was like a month, 2 months, so it can be done faster. But there is another question, if there is a will to continue with this trend.
So thank you. I noticed a question from Professor Małgorzata Pańkowska. I think she would like.
Thank you so much. You mentioned a lot about the COVID. So my question is mostly to the professor from United States. What was the impact, what is still the impact of COVID on the economics and also on research? I think you can give us a lot of examples, but my question is what we have learned, what positive, I would say, experience have been gathered, and particularly I'm thinking about the future, how they could be utilized in the future, these experiences gathered because of COVID. Yeah, thank you.
A couple quick answers. One is resilience. Resilience becomes a hot research topic. You do Google Scholar search, you just do generic Google search, resilience. Another one is to revive an old research topic, organizational slack. What is slack? Slack is something we don't use now. To the human body, I'm sorry to say, slack is the fat in our human body, slack. As much as we'd like to reduce fat as humans, can we imagine we can function with a zero fat body? If you have zero fat, you are hit by COVID, you die right away. So slack, that fat in the human body, is what's being helping you. So companies don't like to talk about this. They like to talk about stockpiles. They like to talk about inventories. It's a supply chain issue, because now just-in-time management is no longer in fashion. Just-in-time management, JIT, I think we all studied, was pioneered by the Japanese, became popular in the 80s and 90s because you have super responsive global supply chains, right? As an automaker, you don't have to keep a large inventory of components. Your just-in-time delivery of components can go into your factory and put the components directly onto the car that you're trying to make. That's awesome. But then, what if you have transportation disruption? What if you have an earthquake in Japan? And what if you have a lockdown in China? Then the solution is you have to enhance your stockpiles, right? And for companies, you enhance your stockpiles. For governments and for individual households, we'll have to prepare some face masks, right? Remember, face masks were in such a shortage 2 years ago, right? So the lesson is every organization needs to have some stockpiles. So in strategic management, we've been doing this research. How much is too much in terms of organizational slack? Managers don't like to do this, but we are scholars. We can call this organizational slack. So now we're talking about just-in-case management. Just in case you need extra face masks. As a country, just in case, you may need to have more tanks and more missiles, right, in case something happens. So just-in-case management. I think all militaries are just-in-case forces for every country. When there's no war, every military becomes organizational slack. But no country is dumb enough to disarm in peacetime, right? So organizational slack. But how much organizational slack you keep, no one can say the more slack, the better, right? So basically what we are learning is relative to the pre-COVID level, we must maintain as country governments, as universities, as companies, as individual households, we must maintain a higher level of slack. And you can call this these inventories, supplies, stockpiles, components, weapons, face masks, what have you. I think that is another important learning point we're getting. So the research about organizational slack, what is the optimal level, right? There's got to be an optimal level beyond which additional stockpiles will destroy value. But zero slack is not reasonable, it's not practical. So the optimal amount is basically between 0 and somewhere in the middle. You need to find that point. So that's another point I can share.
Just building, I mean, you mentioned resilience. Yes, now it's a key word. We read it everywhere. It's a complete change of paradigm. Before it was efficiency, now it's resilience. How do you build the resilience? By diversifying your sources and so on. But I think I won't elaborate on that point. I'd rather, in terms of the consequences and how things have changed, I think it has brought back the state in the picture. Because we had this, how could I say, this idea that not only leave it to the market forces, but basically the state should intervene as less as possible. Industrial policies were a little bit out of fashion in a way. And with COVID, everybody turned to the state to help. Basically, all countries, I mean, the United States, had a huge program to help the population. I'm not even speaking about the EU, where the budgetary constraints suddenly was lifted from one day to the others. So yes, it was because it was a catastrophe, but it also changed the mindset because people and corporations turn to the states. So the role of the state in that change, in terms of perceptions, has changed substantially, and that will have also implication for the future. And the role of the budget and the budgetary element in the running of the economy, came back to the fore. And I'm also mentioning industrial policies because now we are talking about industrialization policies. Suddenly, as if something, from day one we discovered that, I'm talking about the country I come from, which is France, we had lost a lot of industries. I mean, it's just that we realized it. And when I say we, I say the population, the public in general. So now we are talking about industrial policies, which was a word which for a couple of decades were pushed away because the state should not interfere. So it's a different mindset, I think, that we have to realize. And this, I believe, is going to have a lasting effect. And by the way, I believe that the COVID crisis definitely had an impact on global value chain and so on. But the crisis that we are going through now with the war in Ukraine will have an impact which may even be more long-lasting. Because with the COVID crisis, I would say almost the global community was around. Everybody agreed in the same direction. Nowadays, it's not that clear. You have parties or factions, and so that's why it is making more difficult, but the consequences, I think, will be as severe, perhaps more severe, because it's bringing back in the equation of the global value chain energy and distance that we had completely forgotten. So the whole equation is changing, and the uncertainty actually is the word of the day.
Contribute to this question, to the impact, yeah. No, Polish perspective as well, European one, because you put a position paper on the cohesion policy. Yeah, as I'm right.
Yeah, so I think that I mentioned it before that we also see the similar trends that we use the state aid to a bigger extent, and we saw many shields in order to help companies to operate in the COVID. So it was an unprecedented scale, especially in Poland, and we see consequent economic consequences of this with the higher rates of inflation as well. But we see this shift and the involvement of public authorities in reactions to the crisis. And what I also see is that we are living, or we've been starting to live under the permanent crisis. So this is, it was the financial and economic crisis in 2007-2008, and then we have a big migration crisis here in Europe, and we also have right now the consequences of the COVID-19 and the war. So we have a complete shift of priorities, I would say, at different scales. It's companies, it's public administration, there are people who are living in the country. So we need to think differently on our life. So I think resilience is still the buzzword, as well as sustainability. And what I also see as a bit contradictory, the trends. We are going to this climate and digital transformation that are must, but at the same time, because you were asking about the inequalities in the previous session, but it will also, those transformations, they will increase inequalities. So now it's the question how to balance the transitions that are ongoing with the societal problems. So this is just like a more comment to the current situation, but this is also what we see on the arena.
Yeah, it's just I would like to add some comments that in fact the COVID is like the factor, non-economic factor that they contributed to this, not the crisis, but the not stable situation. And another just non-economic factor is the war in Ukraine. So what we observe that there are more and more different factors outside the economic box, which have the impact on our economics. Yeah. And in fact, all these factors we shall take into account while planning our research. Yes. So and also in our report that I mentioned, when we investigate the behavior of the Polish exporters, it was the initial stage. They were quite successful, but of course, because these are non-economic factors which are not predictable, so it's quite difficult to evaluate at that time what would happen in the future. So I do think so that the results of our research, it was about a year ago, are not valid during the current situation. Yes. And okay, are there any questions from the audience? Okay, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a comment. I would like to add another maybe impact of the research on the society, which is based on the cooperation between entrepreneurs and the researchers from the European Union or the European perspective. Now we are pushing using European Union funds to conduct research and development projects. So we need to find the researchers on the one side as startups, let's say, and the startups are also looking for people who are experienced in some field of innovations, let's say. And they need to cooperate at the first stage when they are just thinking about the project, because they need each other in order to propose something what would be successful. And on the other side, they, after this cooperation, when they receive the funds, they just started to realize the product, to introduce that to the market. So now we can find a lot of projects started with the startups, which are combining our cooperation. So this is also the impact from the micro level, and I feel that it is something specific, let's say, for us, for Poland, maybe, but it is really efficient when we are looking for new ways or thinking about sustainability and the needs connected with energy efficient, things like that. We need innovation, but startups are more responsible just to think in a risky way about that and find the funds which are mostly connected with European Union funds. Thank you.
Would you like to make some comments, professors?
I don't have a lot of comments, just to share with you, again, the experience sharing North American perspective. On our campus, we have one such example of collaboration between researchers and entrepreneurs. There is one company, I think private equity company called Blackboard. Hubert, is that called Blackboard, the Launchpad? Blackstone. Blackstone is this private equity company, so it is national and global. So it sets up this on-campus physical presence called Launchpad, like an incubator in different universities. But there are so many universities, so we are one of the lucky ones because we've done a lot of work with our own Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, IIE. So we are one of the chosen universities. Incubator is a big deal. Incubator is to provide physical space for tiny, small startup companies to get going, right? So most of these people are still students or part-time employees elsewhere. So how can they have a physical office space? Well, with COVID, it's less important, but that whole idea of Blackstone Launchpad was planted, I know, on our campus maybe 5 or even 8 years ago. So that is one tangible way as an example that I know of. But in terms of truly publishing papers, with you, if you were an entrepreneur, and with me as a scholar, why are you spending your time with me on my research project? Assuming you're rational, that means the research project has to be valuable to you as well, right, as an entrepreneur. So that has been a challenge. I know we are promoting such research, but I have not seen a lot of examples. That's all I can share. So.
Just building on that, as far as examples are concerned, the incubators I'm aware of, at least for instance in Cornell, there is it's called the Cornell Lab, but it's more for for startup, but technical. It's not really for economists, you know. And I would say it's the same in many European countries, like in Switzerland, you have, but faculty of engineering, then you will have incubators. But that's another issue. As far as economics, much less. However, it's also due to the way the education is conceived and designed. In the United States, you also have grants. You have companies, contributing to budget of university or so on. And for instance, we have the case competition or the pitch competition. We have in the competitions I mentioned a moment ago, we have a case competition, our annual conference. It's for the students who work on a business case and provide the solution. And we have also what is called a pitch competition. So we have young entrepreneurs from all over the world, and they are selected, and you have 5 laureates, and they present in a pitch their project, and they get a small amount of money. And one of the two, I think, is, for instance, financed by Cornell, which is a very big company in the US. It's a practice which is not uncommon in the US, where you have that kind of involvement in the university. To my knowledge, I think it's a less in a European background, because education and university budget and everything, they are not designed the same way.
So thank you. And I'm just wondering, because about the practical aspects of transferring knowledge. Yes, because you mentioned, of course, that it's very important to share the knowledge with our students, outside the research world. So, can you give us examples from your American perspective? What are the new ways of teaching, delivering knowledge? I think that you just could share our views, and could share your knowledge with us, because we are at the stage that we must, especially after COVID, that we must introduce some innovative approach to teaching, learning, and the issues like that. I think that I'm very curious about that. What are the innovative ways of teaching, learning? And I think that we can use the American perspective and transfer to the European one. Or maybe we can transfer from Europe to America.
Okay, let me try. IT team, let me have the slides back. I really cannot speak for the entire North American perspective, but I can speak for my perspective. As you can see, at least I focus more on case teaching. The quiz is a little case, right? This NAFTA deal is another case. Basically, I actually have a case on this. This was developed into a case. Students can discuss and debate, what if we lost NAFTA, what will happen, right? So at least I try in my work, try to be relevant. I think being relevant is very important, being relevant. We cannot always teach from old theories. Old theories are becoming obsolete. And I don't care about your politics, but I can share with you one thing. I thank President Trump for making a lot of old theories, old textbooks obsolete. We have to write new textbooks. Students will have to buy new textbooks and learn from new textbooks, okay? So no, President Trump is transformational as a leader. Whether you like him or truly like him or dislike him, I don't care about your politics, okay? And he is making tremendous contributions to the institution-based view. When I first wrote about the institution-based view, lots of people say, institutions are changing. You want to look at countries like China, Poland, Russia. Their institutions are changing, so institution-based view is a great theory to apply to these countries. But take a look at us. We are developed economies, call us US, UK, Canada, right? Our institutions are stable. Our institutions are pro-market. Our institutions are democratic. So, institution-based view is not that relevant to us. Well, Trump made it very clear. Institution-based view is a global perspective. Institutions can change in every country. Every country becomes a transition economy. It's not a bunch of Central and Eastern European countries that should be called transition economies. Every country is in transition. What you are seeing is transition economies. So allow me to share with you my last few slides. I think that's useful, right? At least my approach. 1992, 30 years ago, The End of History and the Last Man by Fukuyama. You all heard about the book, right? If you have not read the book, don't read it anymore. If you have read it, know how to cite it, right? And now, the return of history. I'm sorry to announce, Poland has been attacked one more time, early this morning. A tragic coincidence, you heard. Okay, true return of history. So, what do we do as scholars? I told you about some of my newest papers. In the new era, I want you to emphasize the new era, right? So, here's my last slide. What we do as scholars, and what we teach in our classrooms, what we write in our journal articles, books, so on and so forth. I think we have to, I am learning. All theories carry some imprinting. We are all products of the environment in which we grew up professionally, personally. Therefore, a lot of the research we have done by me and by colleagues in this room and a lot of the textbooks you have studied, such research was done in the last 30 years, end of Cold War era. So we talk about transition economies, emerging economies. That great paper that I wrote, because it's great, it's my most widely cited paper. I still encourage you to cite this paper. Institutional Transitions and Strategic Choices. It essentially talks about when institutions in many different countries are turning to become more market-oriented, how companies respond and react in strategic choices. As a state-owned enterprise, how you react. As a foreign entrant going to a new economy, how do you adapt to these changing rules of the game, right? And I think this paper now needs to be rewritten. Okay, this paper is about how institutions are changing to become less global, to become more uncertain, more unpredictable than you as a company, you as a manager, how you are going to make your strategic choices. You all studied the new term, Black Swan, right? Black Swan appeared in my 5th edition for the first time. So, new scholarship must address new reality. And this new reality is something we're all struggling with. It's something that we don't know much about, that we are all coping with. But then companies cannot wait. Managers cannot wait. Officials cannot wait. Therefore, as scholars, we cannot wait. So I think it's a challenge not only to me, but to all the colleagues here and to more people here. New scholarship is needed, and new scholarship has to be timely and relevant, and must address this new reality. So these are my slides.
Just to answer to your question on how, the audience and basically the way of teaching and the difference.
Yes.
Basically, I mean, there is a necessity to adapt to the audience. As I said a moment ago, the relationship, at least from my experience, and I do not generalize, but from my experience, there is a close relationship with the students, and there is a lot of openness. There are very direct questions. You engage them. You have an example with Mike, which asks questions, who goes. So that's something which is very much developed in the US audience, perhaps because it corresponds to the American young population. I do not know whether in a European context that would work. Most likely, but I do not have the direct answer. But definitely, we do ask a question, we engage, and we even can be very direct. That's the first thing. So the adaptation to the audience and to stimulate reaction and the close relationship. Also, in the courses, bring, even if the issues are a little bit theoretical, we try to encourage them to what the students know, to bring them in a relationship with the reality, so that it's not something which is in the air, very obscure or very theoretical, but can be translated. Sometimes it's a challenge. It's not always possible, but that's an effort that my colleague and myself, we are doing. And the third element is that, again, it's very practical, is we involve the students in, as I said, in the research. But another example, I mentioned this annual conference. I mean, we have many students who help them in organizing the conference. Some of them will deal with the social media, so they will, because they are very good also, and they will help us. Others will deal with the speakers. Others will also, we will consult them about an issue, what's an interesting issue. So they are really part of the organization of an event from a content point of view, as well as an organizational point of view. And I think it also helps expanding their skills, and it's something which is also to be taken care of.
And what about you? I know that you have a great experience and rich experience in delivering lectures in a new way, maybe.
Well, I wanted to contribute with two examples, but with the American perspective as well, because I was a visiting professor at the University of Lethbridge in Canada, and the approach of students is completely different than in the US. I would say that's more comparable to the European approach, that you need to stimulate students to be involved in the classes. So it was a bit shocking, because we have American students at our university, not that many from Canada. But when I went there for classes, it was just like, okay, I'm coming back to more European standards of dealing with this involvement of people. But of course, then we managed to survive the classes with good discussions, with good projects, and they were very much committed to their works. If I asked students to read the chapters, the handbooks, they were prepared for the classes, which was also another experience, because sometimes you know that not always you are so much involved in your duties at the university. So it is the first experience which comparison between Canada and Europe and Poland as well. And the second experience was with MBA students at IPADE in Mexico again, which is a business school, and it was more like American approach, because it was the teaching way was based on Harvard School. So they were just taught like at Harvard, and they were very much open, very much contributing to the discussion. The classes are based on case studies only, so it was a completely different experience. And one cultural difference, I was asked about giving an advice to Mexican policymakers, economists, and I was aware also of the fact, of course, it's more like a direct and open question, but still you need to take into the account that if you are working with Latin American, they are not very much looking in a positive way on European experiences due to the colonization processes. So you need to be very careful. How do you formulate any kind of recommendations or advice? So you have to be sensitive in that sense. And it was striking to me, and I explained it to them. And they said, that's fine with us. We are trained in the US style, so don't worry about this. But still, you need to think on those differences as well. And for the European, I think that we are trying just to involve students each day more. Thank you.
So thank you. So just to involve our students in putting some questions. Are there any questions from students? Do you have any questions just to be involved? I think that you think about questions in the future, so unfortunately the time is over. And so I have another question for our dear speakers and our prominent guests concerning because today we discussed very broadly about the topic, about the current topics of the research, about the innovation in your research, also from using the perspective, the American perspective, the European one. And I am just wondering what are the future direction of research, but I think that we'll put the question to our PhD students in another session. Unfortunately, we must close the session close the session right now. So thank you very much for joining us today again. The students, guests, speakers. We are very proud to host so prominent guests and also so prominent academics during today's session, during today's debates. I think I appreciate very much your input in our discussion. Of course, some answers may be valuable for academics, for our students as well. And we receive a big portion of knowledge from our guests and will distribute for sure among our students. Yes. So thank you very much for your attention. And once again, thank you for joining the first and the second session during this American Day, during the first day of the project concerning North America. So thank you very much for your attention and once again for attending this session. Thank you very much.